Hello, one and all, and welcome to the podcast we call the Fantastival with myself, Steve Nussbaum, in the podcast where I invite my guests to come on and talk to me all about their musical taste, their memories, their experiences, and they get to collect their fantasy festivals, which I have christened Fantastivals. This episode is now number 131. If you're listening in the UK as we record this, it's still so hot, still so sunny. It's lovely over here. I hope everyone's had a lovely weekend and a lovely week, and I hope you are all well. And before we start this one, just want to give a massive shout out and a thank you to Matt and Brandon and the guys from Die Tired, who are my last guests in the 130th episode of the podcast. This podcast has led me to so many great new acts, whether that's bands, whether that's solo acts, whether it's rock, whether it's indie, whether it's slower music. I just love it all. Die Tired, one of my biggest finds of the podcast so far. So if you've not listened to that one, 130, please go back and do so, because they not only made for great guests from a great band, they've also got one hell of a fantasy festival lineup I urge you to all go and listen to. So that was 130, but it's time now to introduce the guest on the 131st episode of the Fantastival Podcast. And this week, I'm delighted to be joined by someone who I consider to be a new music legend, halfway across the pond, all the way from Chicago. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Diana Tenuto.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for having me and asking me to come on.
Oh, I'm so glad we've made this happen, Diana. I'm looking forward to talking to you all about your musical taste and going back into that memory bank of yours. We're going to have a great chat. It's going to be an awesome time. But before we talk about music, I always like to check in with my guests, see how they're doing from a mental health perspective. It's been a crazy couple of years. So to start off with, Diana, how are you?
I am good, thank you. Yes, it has been a couple crazy years. For those that don't know, I work in healthcare. So it has been nonstop with COVID. And we are finally back to normal. Our masks are gone. We're getting back to the normal day-to-day, and I'm very grateful for that. So life is good. We're enjoying summer here. It's hot, and we're doing real good. I'm happy to be here.
That's fantastic. That's so good to hear. I didn't know you worked in healthcare, so all I can do, Diana, is absolutely take off my cap to you and say an amazing well done for all you do for everyone.
Oh, well, thank you. And a lot of people in all their roles, different fields, did their part. So we all got together and we got through it. But I do appreciate that. Thank you very much.
So I only really know you from a social media perspective, right? So I know you from Twitter. You give amazing music recommendations. You're one of the people who, if they say they're going to listen to something, I'll go, that must be good, because Diana only recommends the best music. So a lot of people probably be in my shoes as well, whereas I've never met you, because obviously you're in Chicago, I'm in the UK. So for anyone listening who might not know a lot about yourself, Diana, tell us a bit about yourself. So who is Diana Tenuto?
Who is Diana? Well, I am Diana. I'm married to Scott, and we have Ivy, our little Yorkie dog, our fur baby. And I'm the oldest of three, and my family's all around here in the area, close by. We just had a weekend where everybody showed up spontaneously for a little backyard barbecue, which is nice. And yeah, I mean, my life is sports and music, and that's at work, but in a good way. So, I mean, we're just, I don't know, I'm just me. I just, find my things that I enjoy and just kind of dedicate myself to it. And yeah. And
you're a keen sports fan, right? So your bio, I think, talks about music, beer, I think is mentioned in your Twitter bio, and I think you say Chicago sports in there. So what are your sports of choice? Because obviously in the US, there's a lot of sports going on.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So people realize we have lots of sports here. So for Chicago, for me, it's hockey, baseball, football, basketball, the main ones. I am an avid, I'll call it soccer here, fan. A few of the guys I work with are very into soccer as well. So I follow the Fire here and obviously our U.S. men's team, but took the days off work for the World Cup because to me that's, I look forward to that every few years. So if it's not sports and we're not following those teams, we're out at concerts and shows and music and festivals in around Chicago. We're lucky that we have all these close to us because you can't get all around the country on weekends to all these other different festivals going on. But we have a lot to offer here. So day games for baseball are the best out in the sun at Wrigley Field. That's probably my favorite place to be outside in the summer for sports. And And then we catch a lot of the winter stuff indoors when we're all kind of locked up and stuck in the snow.
So you mentioned your passions, which are quite clearly coming through, of music and sports. We've spoken about sports a bit. I'm going to take you now to the music side. So without giving away too many spoilers, Diana, music-wise, what are you into?
So I have a wide range, but it's also specific too, if that makes sense. I have a love for the classics that my dad listened to. So you're going with, let's see, The Doors and 10 Years After and Elvis. Oh, my dad sang Elvis to me every night going to bed. That's probably my earliest memory. The Beatles, 10 Years After, CCR, all these bands. That's what I go with my old stuff. Zeppelin, I mean, I could go on forever and ever. I will say in my years, and I'll go into a little bit more, when I grew into more music and different tastes, I probably was never into the boy band scene like most girls were. I had some influences from some neighbors and friends, their siblings. And so then it kind of hit the alternative scene, indie scene in the 90s. And that's when I was going into high school, early 90s. So you know how music influences your life then. And then from there, it's just kind of cascaded into, and I always lean back and kind of go to the indie scene. And I know it covers a lot of areas, that term, but and you know from what I post and what I share now that I just feel like the UK indie scene is just on fire. Can't get enough of it. The bands are touring here. I'm catching all of them as I can. So yeah, so I mean, if I had to pinpoint a genre, I'm going to go with the classics, the rock, the alternative, the indie. And that's probably where my love is at the most. And I just pick up the new and then recycle the old and love it.
I love the fact that you mentioned like bonding or listening to Elvis with your dad. And you mentioned that as an early musical memory. Have you? What are the rest of like your kind of musical early memories? Do you have any more?
Yeah, I do. So for those that don't know, I started playing an organ when I was 5 and then switched to piano. So from an early age, I was playing music. And we have a lot of talent in our family. I have my grandmother, her siblings, they all played everything you can imagine, piano, clarinets, horns, guitars. So I picked up on that early and started taking lessons and really got into actually playing. Now, I never joined a band or the orchestra. Piano's a little unique, but all the way through I graduated high school at 18, I took lessons for piano. To this day, if I have music, I can sit down and play it. I'll be a little rusty. Takes me a little bit. And I even got the nerve up to share a couple songs with the Murder Song of the Day Squad.
Oh, did you?
On my piano. I did. Okay. Yeah, I finally got the nerve to do that. I need to do more. We just did some remodeling at home, so my piano was moved to a different room. I got to get it back so I could play more. But so that started probably when I was about 5. But around that same time, my dad's influence. My dad was an avid music fan and collector. I'll be honest, in his bachelor days before I came along. And he still has, trying to get my hands on it, a very avid, large collection of Sheffield vinyls. Have you ever heard of those? Called Sheffield. So there's a few companies, but they were the very first recording off the master disc. So when the band would record the master disc, the very first recording on vinyl was called the Sheffield. So you got the best sound. So my dad would go to a special store and all his vinyls are these Sheffield. And so he had these 5-foot speakers set up in the living room. And eventually my mother moved them because she wanted a functional living room. But we would play the vinyls and he'd put them on reel-to-reel tape so he could preserve the vinyls and we'd listen. So him and I really connected on that. And he introduced me to a lot of the older bands and explained to me why they were so good. And then we would watch Elvis's Aloha from Hawaii all the time. He had it recorded somewhere, probably his favorite. But so from a young age, I was sitting with him playing music. When CDs came about for cars, we started shopping and getting all the albums on CD. Him and I would go out and find them. Couple good record stores in the city of Chicago we'd go to and make a day of it. And so then we started duplicating the vinyl collection on CD. Funny thing is now vinyls are back. Yeah. So I keep telling him I'm staking my claim on those and keeps telling me we'll work out a deal for him. But yeah, so right from the start, music was just always around. So to this day, everything I do, if I'm not watching something on TV, I'm listening to music, whether I'm streaming it, playing my vinyls outside. It's just what I do at work. I have it going all day. I'm very lucky at work. I'm in a little bit more of an administrative role now than clinical, which is good and stressful, but I can always have my music on, which helps. So that was probably me until I was about 8 or 9. And from there, I couldn't remember where I got some of my tastes from. And then it hit me as I was reflecting for this. My best friend's brothers were about 8 years older than us. So when I was about 10 years old, we would sneak and listen to them playing their music. And it was the Smiths, The Cure, Joy Division, Ramones, Stone Roses, Bowie. So we started, oh, what is this? Well, that's all we knew then. So they were in a band, they were playing this stuff. I didn't realize what I was being exposed to. So as a young kid, even early teenager, I had this big jump on because my age, I wouldn't have heard that stuff. My parents didn't as much because they were raising 3 kids in the 80s. They missed that. They missed that whole decade. So as much as we probably annoyed them, I'm grateful for them because they introduced me to a whole sound and type of music that I wouldn't have known existed. I probably would have found it eventually. We all do. But yeah, I mean, I was a 10-year-old running around with a Ramones t-shirt on. I probably didn't know what that meant as much as maybe others did. But yeah, we picked up on it. And so when they were gone, we'd sneak in and play their tapes and get in trouble. But yeah, I'm grateful for that because it really kind of brought me into that type of music. And I don't know, for those that don't know, at that time, the UK music scene was big here too, especially as punk was going on and all that. So they were all into it as cool high schoolers. And so I got lucky enough to catch on to that and hook on and bring that into my music library in my head.
Amazing musical upbringing you had there, Diana. Incredible. And this is like all pre-internet, right? So it's not like these days where you can go on Spotify and it's at your fingertips. You actually had to work to find the music and find the bands and get into them. So incredible.
Yeah. No, there was definitely no internet or anything. So we only knew what we heard or saw. And so then we'd go to the store and we look for those, but then we'd find the others. And so like right about that time when I went into high school, they had an event and a couple local bands performed. And that's where I got into a little bit more of the alternative scene because somebody was performing Smashing Pumpkins. They were playing Disarm off the Siamese Dream album. And I went the next day to buy that album, or CD, I should say. I fell in love with it instantly. So everything just kind of dominoed to me and kind of worked out perfect. And then I found my little current niche of the music I loved and went from there and then fell into everything that kind of went into that same category or genre, I'd call it.
I would say you've also kind of fallen into like the UK new music scene on Twitter.
Yep.
How did that come about?
So my Twitter for the longest time was sports. Twitter is, I noticed here in the US, a little bit more of a reference for a lot of people. Like to go see what the breaking news is or player gets injured, so you want to get the latest deal, sports deal. During COVID, I don't know even how, I just somehow got connected with a couple people. I noticed something with music, and it's actually from there is when I got wind of the Snuts and the Lathams. And I'm probably saying it wrong, but that's at least how I say it.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect.
Okay. And all of a sudden I was like, okay, this is cool. I like this a lot. And so my husband, he always had a music interest. He interned in college for a couple of years with Universal. So we were lucky enough to go to some shows and meet bands. And so I'm like, hey, check this out. And he's like, oh, they sound good. And then I got wind of the virtual pub crawl and the indie disco. And forget it. That was that was it. I always had to start early in the day. So
in the UK, it's like till midnight, right? Or till like 1 a.m. Yeah. But your time, it's like till 4. So you're sitting there sloshed mid-afternoon and all this music.
Oh, God, yeah. So now, remember, it was during COVID. So what were we all doing? We would go to work, for those of us that were going to work. Us in healthcare, I'm not going to lie, we came home and we were having drinks every night. No one knew what else to do. We were stuck at home. And so on Fridays, when Indie Rob would have the indie disco, I would start it at 3, I'd hit play, and I'd leave work. So I'd stay lined up, and I'd get home, change real quick, take the dog out, pour a drink, and take it into about our dinner time. But I loved it. And then I started interacting, and I realized, okay, wait, this I like this. This, to me, is better than, the other socials, and it just exploded from there. You know, I became friends with people. I mean, it's amazing. You just talk to some people through a screen, but all of a sudden then, you know, I'm finding this band and this band. And then what was great was the Lathams and the Red Run Club were coming to Chicago. And I was like, this is unbelievable. I think it was March of last year. So we told some friends, we grabbed tickets, and I got to tell you, it was unbelievable. I couldn't believe that I had watched them kind of come into what they were and that they were here. I don't think they could believe that they were here. So we caught them here. It was a small venue. They were, I think, beyond shocked that those of us here, and there were quite a few of us, knew the words. I had brought my vinyls. Someone had suggested, bring it, maybe they'll sign it. And they did. They were shocked that I owned their vinyls. And then later last year, Red Rum Club came back and they were doing their own little tour. So we caught them again. You know, I got to say, really great group of guys. After the show, we all went to the bar next door and sat there for hours, having beers and talking, just so down to earth. So I felt like a kid in a candy shop. Here, to me, I'm idolizing these guys. And then they're here playing. They're so happy to be here. And I can't believe that I'm seeing them live, where even friends of mine hadn't caught them yet live. So, and then from there, it's just, then you find this band and that band. And amongst all this is when I got into the vinyls. And I just, to support the bands, I don't even care about the shipping costs. I order them. And, you know, I've had a couple of friends who shipped them to me, you know, offered to help. And so everybody kind of comes together so I can do my part, but also enjoy and have my own copies. And I just love it. It's my little community I found that just makes me so happy.
Great stories, great bands as well. I'm so happy that you get to meet the bands, because I guess when they come over to you, it's obviously like a massive adventure. No disrespect to them playing like London or Birmingham or Manchester, but for those bands to go and play somewhere like Chicago, for them must be an absolute thrill. And like you said, when they get there and you know the words and you're holding one of their records, it must be like crazy.
And they conveyed that to us when we were talking afterwards. And so, you know, we agreed. I said, listen, it's a two-way street. I'm happy that you get to do this. And I'm happy that I'm sitting here talking to you, which if I was over the pond, that would probably never happen. But so, yeah, it's been great. We been to a few shows this year with some other bands, and got some more coming up too. So I'm really, really excited. The summer of concerts for sure.
Absolutely. So what are you listening to at the moment, Diana? I know that you listen to loads and you post some great tracks, but at the moment, what's on your speakers, whether that's a new act or an older act, what are you listening to?
One of the new ones I had talked about, just because I really think they're going to do good things, is a good friend of mine's in a band here called Drinking Poppy, and they're just getting out together. It's four dads, and they've been heavy on my playlist. Otherwise, right now I've been on the last few weeks these new albums that came out. The Royston Club I'm obsessed with. Cannot stop playing it. Let's see what else. I have my blends and I have my mixes that I listen to, and then I keep making my heavy rotations, and keeps growing and growing because there's so much. Let's see. The Utopia, it's that album that came out. I've really been playing a lot. That's been and then really like the new Snuts song Gloria, and we just saw them last week here, and they sounded great. So they're in there. Brown Bear, I'm obsessed with that album and really enjoyed his show listening to that. Yeah, I mean, I could go on the list. There's just so much coming out right now. It's almost impossible to keep up. You know, Friday's coming. I'm getting nothing done at work for the first half of the day because I'm trying to listen to all the new music.
Yeah, I mean, Adi Hansen, the utter legend that's Adi Hansen, sent me a link to his playlist, new music playlist for the Friday just gone, and there were like 50 tracks on there. It's just like,
but thank God for that, because without that I'd be lost. I can't keep up. So I'm very grateful for these music champions out there that are sharing these lists to help me stay in touch. But no, so right. Oh, and you know, the other one is the new Foo Fighters. I have to say, that new album has been fantastic. So I do listen to American bands, I promise. But yeah, no. So it's been I have my mixes that I make, my little playlist, and so getting those down, and then by the time I'm caught up with those and know them all backwards and forwards. More new music is out. So it's a good problem to have, don't get me wrong. But there's just so much, and I'm just so happy for it.
Brilliant stuff. Well, let me take you back then to when you was a younger girl and it was time for you to go and buy your first record or single. Do you remember what they were and that experience?
I do. So another thing I should have mentioned but forgot, my father has a 1957 Seaberg jukebox.
Wow.
That plays 45s. It was, my mother said I bought it for him for my first birthday. So good job, me. So it came preloaded with a lot of old 50s and 60s vinyls. But my first one I bought, I was having a birthday party. And so my mom said, let's go buy a couple albums for your party. So the first actual record that I bought was the Bangles on 45 for Eternal Flame, because that was what was big and that's what I had to have at my party. But then the actual CD that I went out and bought was that Siamese Dream in 93 after hearing the band in high school play that. So Smashing Pumpkins got my first CD, and then the Bangles got my first vinyl, probably, whenever that was, late 80s. So those were the first ones to hit my collection.
Great choices. Absolutely fantastic choices. So Diana, this podcast is all about you collating your fantasy festival. Are you a big festival fan? Have you been to many?
Yes and no. So festivals here are a little bit different because the way they're spread out. I wish I could fly to California or Texas or on the East Coast every weekend, but it's not real doable. Chicago has a few. Our most famous is Lollapalooza, which I love. That was probably one of the best shows because we went when concerts were allowed back after COVID. So that was 2021, I believe. And it's a 4-day fest. It's downtown on the lake. There's about 8 different stages set up, and it's just what you would expect. You can go wait up in front for the bands and be right there. You could sit in a nice shady spot and hear the music. So Lollapalooza is a must-do for us every year. There's a few other smaller festivals that kind of tie into Street Fest here, and we'll try and hit those. We always hit the blues one. Can't not go enjoy blues music if you're from Chicago. But other than that, the rest are a little bit of a hike. So we end up doing a little bit more of just individual concerts. Like I said, I wish I could travel all those days, but we have to all work and pay the bills. So,
and in terms of individual concerts then, so I always like to ask this question, again, no spoilers if you can, but it sounds like you've been to loads of gigs. Do you have a favourite gig, or do you have a selection of favourite gigs at all?
I do. So probably my favorite gig, there's a little venue called Northerly Island here in the city. It's on the lake. It used to be a little airport. And so it's smaller. It's where we were this past weekend. And the first time I saw the Counting Crows there, who are one of my favorites, was probably going to stand out as one of my most favorite shows. It was a hot summer night with the cool breeze. They're playing. It was just that perfect atmosphere. The Lollapalooza after COVID, I think, just had some meaning. We were kind of getting back to normal. Live music was back. You don't know what you're missing until they take it away from you. And missing concerts was really hard. So that whole festival stood out. But the headliners that festival was Foo Fighters, and they were in the, I can't think of who else. But that was something else too. Just everybody was kind of getting back into the swing of things. The artists too. I mean, a lot of them hadn't performed yet. So that was really memorable. And then probably the oldest one I could remember would be going to see No Doubt way back in probably 2000. But the reason was because of what my husband was doing. We got to go backstage and meet the band and hang out with them. And I was 20 years old. I couldn't even legally drink yet. And that blew my mind away. Because until then, my parents were good parents, but they were a little bit more sheltered. I wasn't allowed to go out all night or, go into the city to see a show late. We had to have parents drop us off and stuff. So doing that was really memorable because not only was I enjoying this great show, I was meeting the band, sitting with them, taking pictures. And it was really something else.
That sounds amazing. So you mentioned some great acts already, some great festivals. And like I said, at the top of the podcast, the aim of this episode is to get our guest, who is Diana. She gets to collect her fantasy festival, so she gets to choose any 5 acts, one of whom must play one of their studio albums in full. And she also gets to pick an encore, which all 5 acts of hers will perform together at the end of a fantasy festival. So for any first-time listeners, it's a very simple concept now. 5 acts take 5 time slots. So, for example, in the last episode of the podcast, I had on Matt DeAngelis and Brandon Ballantyne from Die Tired, and they created their Better Off Alive Fantasy Festival. In their opening slot, they had Kashmir, who are a Danish band, I believe. I've not heard of their stuff yet, but I look forward to listening to that. In their super second slot, they picked Blink 182, making their Fantastival debut, as did Alice in Chains in their Midway Madness slot, so some great choices there. In their pre-headline act, they picked Silverchair, and for their headline act, they picked Die Tired, so they picked themselves to headline their own fantasy festival, because why wouldn't you if you can do so? And for their encore, they had all 5 acts perform Bohemian Rhapsody. So that's how simple it is for anyone listening for the first time. So before we get to pick Diana's 5 Fantastival acts, we need to give her fantasy festival a name, and we need to give it a venue. So Diana, what are you going to call your fantasy festival?
So we are going to have the City by the Lake Shake. City by the Lake is a nickname for Chicago. I am a hometown girl. I love the city. And when I tell you where it's going to be, you'll understand the name of it. So City by the Lake Shake is my Fantastival.
I love it. So we've got City by the Lake Shake. I'm going to tell you, I know you already know where we're going, but you can take us anywhere in the world. It sounds like we're not going to go too far from Chicago. And I think you mentioned Wrigley Field that I kind of know. I recognise the name, but couldn't do anything about it. So, Diana, where are you taking us for City by the Lake Shake?
I'd love to take us to Wrigley. I've actually seen a few shows there, but it's a little bit of a headache because it's a baseball park and there's no parking. But we are actually going to go to Promontory Point, and it is a peninsula just south of downtown. And you have we have Lake Michigan surrounding you on 3 sides, and the backdrop is to me, the most beautiful skyline in the world, Chicago. And what I like about this spot is it's a bit secluded, but it's also, you're not that far from everything. So you're going to have this nice atmosphere where everyone's going to be able to sit and relax. You're going to have the skyline as your backdrop, and you're going to have the lake all around you. And people don't always realize Chicago is a lake city. We're not typical, it's not a fishing town, but it's all along that lakefront. So there's nothing quite like being on there for a show or just enjoying the day. But this is where my Fantastival is going to be. It's my favorite little hidden spot in the city. And so that's where I want to enjoy the show with everybody that's coming to see it.
Amazing. So we're all with you. City by the Lake Shake, taking place at Promontory Point. Hopefully I've said that correctly. I think I have.
You did?
I did. Fantastic. So before you talk about your 5 acts, I can imagine being a massive music fan has probably caused you a headache or 2.
Oh, you have no idea.
Are there any acts who you want to shout out, who you love, but aren't able to join us for City by the Lake Shake?
Yeah, so anybody that knows me is going to probably be surprised, but the Counting Crows are going to not make it. But there's a good reason. If anybody has seen the Counting Crows, Adam likes to improvise and kind of go on forever. And he does great things live, but if we let him, he'll take over the whole time, so we can't have that. I saw him once, and he was playing Rain King, and in the middle of it, played The River by Bruce Springsteen, just
wow,
out of nowhere. It was fantastic. But the problem is he's going to take everybody's slots if we let him. So as much as I would love to, and I have seen them a few times, they're going to get missed. And I think they'll be okay with it.
They have been picked once before as a headliner right back in the day, but obviously won't be joining us for that. Anyone else you want to shout out at all?
Yeah, the Beatles. As much as I would love to, and my mother will probably never forgive me, I do want to, but when I finally got my list down, they just didn't make the cut. There's no knocking them. We all know how great they are. One of my influences, but they are going to be on the sidelines for this one.
Perfect. All right, so Counting Crows aren't coming. The Beatles aren't coming. So I guess it's time to talk about the 5 that are. So we have City by the Lake Shake taking place at Promontory Point. It's 2:00, Diana. Everyone's out. It's a lovely day in Chicago. Your opening act are about to take the stage. So, Diana, who's going to open your fantasy festival?
So the opening act for my Fantastival is going to be the Seagirls, coming from your neck of the woods.
Okay.
So amongst the first couple bands that I was kind of introduced to when I kind of found this music world. A good friend introduced me to them, and I loved them from the start. This weekend, while I was trying to narrow my choices down, I realized I had them on the radio, on the speaker, and every song I was just singing it, and I'm like, why aren't they at my show? So they're going to open things up for us. I think they got a good sound to get things started. I have so many of their songs that I realize I've liked and favorited. So they're going to get things started off for us with a nice, good, fresh start.
Great stuff. So the Seagulls are opening your fantasy festival. They're going to play from 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock. First time they've been chosen for a fantasy festival, so they make their Fantastival debut, and that'll be fantastic. We'll take a half-hour break after the Seagulls play. That'll take us to 3:30, and it'll be time for your Super Seconds act, Diana. So who's going to be your Super Seconds act?
So we're going back to the past for this one, and we are going to have CCR, Creedence Clearwater Revival. The band that probably got me into music with my dad. The band that I probably know the most songs to the album, Two Backwards and Forwards, from that era. And I've seen John Fogerty perform, who's unbelievable. So to be able to see that whole band, they're going to be my legends, my classics. For any of the older folks that are there, they can see them and then get home early before it's dark if they want to. But yeah, they're going to be number 2, and they're going to get things rocking and going after the Seagulls.
That's a great shout. They only get an hour, obviously. So are there any songs that, as they're walking past you, as they go on stage, that you're going to tell them they have to play?
Yes, they have to play Cotton Fields. They have to play Fortunate Son. And then my other favorite is Midnight Special, because I'm an avid Twilight Zone fan, and that's in the movie from the 80s and one of my favorites. So they have to at least play those 3. They can probably fit a few more in their time slot, but if I get those, I'll be real happy.
Great shout. So the second time Creedence Clearwater Revival have been chosen for Fantasy Festival. They're going to play from 3:30 to 4:30. It's going to be quite a show. And then we're going to take another half-hour break, and that'll take us to 5 o'clock. It'll be time for your Midway Madness act. So Diana, who's your Midway Madness act?
So this act is my white whale, the one I cannot seem to catch, and it's going to be Kings of Leon. No matter what I do, I can't get to see them. It never lines up, or something comes up. So I'm going to bring them to me. I'm going to finally get to see them live. Of all the vinyls I had, I was looking through them. I probably have more of their albums as I put my collection together. But the back catalog, the older stuff, I love it all. So they're going to be right in the middle, and finally get to see them after all these years.
It's actually, believe it or not, the first time Kings of Leon have been chosen for a fantasy festival. So the Follow-All family gets to actually come to a fantasy festival. Your fantasy festival as well.
Love it. How about that? Hey.
Once again, I'll ask you the question. Anything that you... I mean, they've got loads of albums now. I feel like they're still quite a new band, which is ridiculous because they're not at all. But any tracks that you would have to have them play as they're going onto your stage?
Yeah. So we'll go back to a little bit of the older stuff. I want to hear Arizona. I want to hear Fans, Holy Roller Novocaine, Ragu. I go with the older stuff a little bit more. It's all good, don't get me wrong, but some of those and not as popular, but those are the ones that seem to make my rotation over and over again and keep popping up on my repeat. So those are a few that I would definitely like to hear from them live.
Great stuff. I don't think I've ever seen Kings of Leon live either, thinking about it. I thought I had.
I'm glad it's not just me.
Yeah, well, we'll both be at your fantasy festival having a great time, so Kings of Leon Duck will be broken as we're watching them. So they're going to play 5 till 6. Amazing first 3 acts we got so far. We'll take one more half-hour break, so 3 down, 2 to go. Your full fact, your pre-headline acts get an hour and a half to play. They're going to play from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. So Diana, who's going to be your pre-headline act?
So we are bringing back to Chicago for this spot the Mighty, Mighty Foo Fighters, and probably one of my favorites. I really struggled where I put them here, but Dave's going to take a back seat to my headliner, and I think he'll be fine with it. They put on an amazing show. He loves us here. So Foo Fighters are getting the next spot, the pre-headline. Great
shout. The third time the Foo Fighters have been chosen, but I will say the first time they're not headlining a fantasy festival. So Dave's had to be talked into it. Danny, you've done a great job getting him to be a pre-headline act because the rumour is backstage he only plays headline slots. So it's the first time he's ever been picked as pre-headline. Again, I mean, their new album's fantastic. The Foo Fighters. It's so good. what would you want to hear? I mean, again, an hour and a half, you can hear loads of tunes, but I guess in terms of a Foo Fighters catalogue, not that much time. So what do you want them to play for you?
Well, one of my favorite songs by them, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is Wheels, which is, I think, on their greatest hits, but I don't believe it was on a studio album. And so every time I've seen them, I hope, and I don't get it. So Wheels has to be on there. We got to go with the old This Is a Call, one of the first songs I remember at that time, high school, when that came out. Of course, you got to have Times Like These. Do love that, the second to this album that came out before this one, Making a Fire, and then of course Everlong. He does a great way to end his sets with that, if that's what he plays, or the acoustic, which is probably my favorite acoustic song of all time, is Everlong. So if I can get those amongst whatever other surprises he has for us, I'll be happy with that.
Brilliant stuff. So Foo Fighters playing in your pre-headline act slot, amazing band, and they will play from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. We'll take one more half-hour break. Then it'll be time for your headline act to take the stage. So your headliners are going to get 2.5 hours. They're going to play from 8:30 to 11 o'clock. So Diana, your first 4 acts have been absolutely sensational. But who is going to headline City by the Lake Shake?
So we have to go with some hometown boys here, and it's going to be the Smashing Pumpkins. Up there as well with, I could never pick a favorite if I had to. So these few here are definitely my favorite bands, but the Smashing Pumpkins, they formed right near here, maybe about 15 minutes from where I've lived my whole life. And so they're going to be headlining this show here in Chicago. They're going to take the stage. That's why I think Dave and the Foo will forgive us and let sit second. But yeah, so the Smashing Pumpkins are going to headline and close this Fantastival out the right way.
Great stuff. What lineup are you going to have? Are you going to have what's regarded as the classic? Because you get to pick the lineup as well, because it's your fantasy festival. Are you going to go for like the classic lineup?
For Pumpkins?
Yeah.
So actually, they're the ones that I want to play the full album. I was torn with this, with the order, and with my song, my encore and everything. So it kind of all tied in. So I want to hear Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. That to me is one of the greatest albums ever made, in my opinion. But we're going to let them play it out of order, whatever order they want, because one of those songs is what I would like to have at the end. So if he wants to throw in a few others, I'll take Today or Disarm or Perfect, but definitely have to give us that full album.
Absolutely. All right. Amazing choice there. So you mentioned, or you alluded to, your encore is going to come from that album. So what are you going to have? Well, 11 o'clock, let's say the Smashing Pumpkins set ends, then they're going to welcome back on stage Foo Fighters, Kings of Leon, Creedence Clearwater Revival, and the Seagulls, and they all get to play one song of your choice. So what are you going to have them play, Diana?
Okay, they're going to be playing Tonight by the Smashing Pumpkins. For those that don't know, there's a line in there referencing Chicago. The line where it says, "And the embers never fade in your city by the lake." That's Chicago, for those that don't know.
I didn't know that, to be fair. I've heard that song. Yeah. I've heard that song hundreds of times, and I've never even put that. I didn't even know they were from Chicago. I mean, I'm a very casual fan, but you learn something on every podcast. You learn something.
You do. We all learn something new every day. So that's a lyric that has stuck out to me forever. In fact, I'll probably have it tattooed one day if I ever get around to doing it. But that's what inspired my name, City by the Lake Shake. City by the Lake is a nickname for Chicago as well, but he put that in there. It's our city. We're on the lake, so I want to tie it all together. But being one of my most favorite songs anyway, I can't think of a better way than all of the bands out there singing that, and especially that part. And it's going to be nighttime now, and you're going to have, like I said, the lake, the wind, the lights. It's just going to be that moment that I could picture in my head and I would always love to see.
Amazing. Great choice there. So Smashing Pumpkins, your headliners, second time they've been chosen on the Fantastival podcast. So let's lock this in before you change your mind. So you can change your mind until the point of locking it in.
Nope.
So
this is done.
So we have City by the Lake Shake taking place at Promontory Point in Chicago. Opening act, we've got the Seagulls. Super seconds, we've got Creedence Clearwater Revival. Midway Madness, we've got Kings of Leon. Pre-headline act, we've got the Foo Fighters. Your headline is going to be the Smashing Pumpkins. They're going to play Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness in full. And for your encore, all 5 acts are going to play tonight. Diana, sounds amazing to me. Are you happy to let that one into the Fantastival vaults?
I'm happy with it. I think we have a winner there.
Amazing. That's an awesome fantasy festival. So I guess before we round up then, you said you got like quite a few gigs coming up. What's up next for you, like musically? What are you looking forward to? What gigs you got coming up?
So we have a few things coming up. A week from tomorrow, we're going to be seeing Noel Gallagher and his High Flying Birds and Garbage. They're performing together. Middle of July, we're going up to Milwaukee to see Foo Fighters. We then have Lollapalooza in August. And looking forward to seeing the Red Hot Chili Peppers, 1975, Mountjoy, Tom Odell, Foles. They're all going to be there. So they're all on my list to see. And then the one I'm really looking forward to at the end of August is Fontaine's DC and Arctic Monkeys are coming to town.
Wow.
So hot ticket, sold out within an hour here in October. And we were able to find some about a month ago on the secondary market. So we're locked in for that. And I am really excited for that show.
Is that at an arena, or I don't know how big the Arctic Monkeys are in America? Is it an arena show? I take it.
Yeah, that one it's at our United Center, and that's where the Blackhawks and the Bulls play. So it's indoors, the basketball hockey team. So it's indoors, which is nice, and beautiful sound in there. It's huge, and so that'll be a really great show, and I am really looking forward to that one.
Yes, sounds like you got some amazing gigs lined up, Dan. I look forward to seeing and hearing all about it on your social media. And I think we should shout out your social media before we finish. So if anyone's on Twitter, doesn't currently follow you, where would someone follow you, and how? What would they search you under?
On Twitter, it's just my name, Diana Tenuto, all one word, DianaTenuto. And then I think the same on Instagram. And so I'm pretty unoriginal when it comes to my name, just me. But and that's where I spend most of my time, with these people and friends that I have found, and the different radio shows, and just this community. So I'm there. Sometimes I'm a little off on the time zones, but I do my best to catch up and get on it first thing in the morning or late at night. So
amazing. It's probably worth mentioning it. Was it 6 hours behind?
Yeah, 6 hours. So not horrible.
No, amazing dedication from you. And guys, I can't recommend Diana's Twitter site enough. So make sure you go and give Diana a follow for all the best recommendations out there in the Twitterverse. So that is it, everyone. Thank you for listening to the 131st episode of the Fantastival Podcast. And if you've enjoyed this one, please subscribe. You can give the Fantastival Podcast a review on iTunes. If you're listening on Spotify, you can also go and rate the show, and you can also leave a comment on the episode. So if you're on Spotify, rate the show and leave a comment, and if you're on iTunes, subscribe and give the podcast a review. So Diana's on Twitter, so are we, so make sure to give us a follow at FantastivalP on Twitter. We are also on TikTok, having some great fun on there, and if you're not on Twitter or TikTok, you can email the podcast at fantastivalpodcast@outlook.com. Unfortunately, we can't play music on this podcast, but I'll get a playlist from Diana. We'll put that in your episode description link. So if you scroll down in your episode details, there'll be a nice little link there, and you'll be able to hear some of the tracks from the acts that we have spoken about on this very special episode. So Diana, massive thank you for being my 131st guest. I know you said you were nervous and then you were excited about it. How have you found being on the podcast?
I'm good now. I'm glad I did it. I really appreciate you reaching out, or anybody that had a hand in it. So thank you. I hope everybody enjoys it. I hope everybody can understand me okay. And I'm looking forward to it airing. So Thank you again. I really, really enjoyed this.
Amazing. There were a few DMs in the Fantastival's inbox saying you should get Diana on, and we aim to please. So we did that. But yeah, you've been a great guest. Have the best time at all your forthcoming gigs. And like I said, I look forward to hearing and seeing and reading all about them. So that is it, everyone. Like I said, I'll be back next week with episode number 132. So please make sure to join me. But until then, stay safe, my Fantastival friends. Please continue to spread the word. And that word is Fantastival. Thanks for listening.